Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to another Shamshir Sound video. My name is Ali Nadam, and in today's episode we're going to do a review of a masterclass by an artist called Loopers. And it seems like he makes electro, big room, really filthy house music, so why not? That's a genre that's really important to me, and there's a lot that we can learn from this. I've optimized the video. It was around 30 minutes. I've cut it down to like 18 minutes, and we're going to review it also. So this was a suggestion by Mike. Thank you, Mike, for the suggestion. We're going to dive deep into this. And if you guys have any requests, please feel free to smash a comment below. And before we dive deep, make sure you guys smash that like button and make sure you guys are subscribed. We're doing a giveaway at 500 subscribers. So smash that notification bell. Make sure you guys are subbed, and let's jump right in.
Welcome, my name is Loopers. Today I'm doing a masterclass and I'm explaining my latest release, I'm Out, that has been released on STEM Recordings. I usually always start my songs with the intro, and I always have an extended mix and like a Spotify mix for tracks, because for DJs you need another mix for clubs, and for Spotify as a listener you want the song to not have a very long intro so it stays interesting for the listener.
So this was really cool when he mentioned this. This is very true. And it didn't occur to me like maybe I should make shortened mixes for my Spotify. I think this is a good suggestion. And what he said with trying out the intro, do what works for you. I like to work on the drop first and build around it. An artist I was talking to lately, he likes to work on the break. And here, Loopers, he starts on the intro. So work with whatever works for you. There's no rules, but I think definitely I'll try that, making like a shortened mix. I think that's a good suggestion.
Before I start making any track, I'm the producer that always puts my master chain on. So before I start explaining the track, I want to show my master chain. So first of all, I start off with the EQ. In my mix, I want certain frequencies and to just be a mono, and certain frequencies I want in stereo. I do this because it makes the mix more clean and it makes it more tight on the master chain. Play for yourself with it and see what just sounds nice for you. So this is for the master and the EQ. Then I use the glue.
So he's really right. Using, of course, an EQ on the master can be very beneficial. Here he did a mid and side EQ. You don't have to do mid side, but of course you have your stereo side elements, you have your mid elements, the mono elements, and it's very popular to put a EQ there. I believe he did a high pass around 20 hertz for the mid and around 120 for the side. You don't have to do this. These values always change, and it's important for you to find what works for you. I like how he said he puts the master chain on, because I'm going to talk about that in a bit.
That's a compressor. It's a very good compressor. I put the ratio from 4 to 2 because I don't want it to be that heavy.
I agree with this. I don't recommend doing extremely heavy compression on the master, because then really nothing can breathe. Everything just gets suffocated. So when you use SSL compressor, or in this case the glue, which is another SSL style compressor, I think 2-to-1 ratio is good.
And I have a very fast attack. And my release, I changed from 0.1 to 0.2.
There I disagree with him, but he's making fire music, and if it works for him on that track, then all the power to him. I don't think a very fast attack is always needed, because a very fast attack, like he said, I'm not sure exactly what his settings are, but a fast attack will crush the kick. It will eat up that initial transient. So do what works for you. Maybe in this case, it really glued the track together. Who knows? You know, there's no rules.
I put the threshold on -9, and I put the makeup on +9.1 in this case. This also is not a value you should every time use. I would say start off with like -7, +7 for your makeup, and if you want to compress it more, just push the threshold up and push the makeup up as well. After the glue, I use the ozone, and that's the imager. Put my stereo elements in my track even a little bit more wider. But what I want to do is to keep the mono frequencies and the low frequencies, I want to keep those in mono. So in case of this track, my root key is the E, and the third octave of the E, the frequency is 164 hertz.
This point he brought up is very important. It's always important for you to be conscious about how you're choosing to boost frequencies. Of course, you want to listen to see how it sounds, but there is mathematics, science behind it, in that if you go on FabFilter Pro Q and instead of typing a frequency, you type E0, E1, E2, you can boost and accentuate certain frequencies that are part of the root key of your track. So dive deep into that. I'm going to link a page where you can look at a chart, and I recommend printing it off. I got to print it off too. And then you can see, oh, D is this frequency, and then D sharp 2 is this frequency. And that can help you learn a lot about how those frequencies and the notes play a role in the boosts, cuts, and different stuff you do with EQs. And here I agree with what he's going to explain, because he's boosting only slightly. He's not going extreme. And he's just giving a little bit of boost, a little bit of extra widening to the sounds. Not necessary, but he did it here.
So what I do is that I make sure that this first band is on 164. My first band, I want no stereo, so I put this thing on 0, and I don't use it. The other bands, you can play with those things here. You can put these a little bit wider, or this one a little bit wider. It's just also taste. Use a bandwidth of like mostly between 15 and 20. In this case, it's 17.7, 12.7, and 15.2. Once again, these values, you can play around with it, but make sure your first band is on 0 because you want your bass in mono.
I agree. There can definitely be bassy stuff going in the stereo field, but many times I had really beginner producers send me stuff where their kick is like wide and the kick has no impact. I've had it where like there's nothing in the center. And Maddox said himself, some producers send him stuff, it's so wide, they think that they need to just literally crank everything wide. And it's like, no, there's center and there are wide elements. And what he's saying here is true. I also don't recommend, sometimes I've said it in videos to do it, but I've kind of backed off that statement of always taking the master and making everything like minus 100 in that first band of his ozone imager. Because if your stuff is good on the mixer tracks, careful with what you do. You could do more harm on your master. And if the bass elements are already mono in your track, you don't need to go into ozone imager and pull that slider down minus 100. So good for him for just boosting the width a bit and leaving the sub untouched. He didn't boost it nor take it downwards to make it center, because his stuff's already center.
I only use a limiter, and that's the brick wall limiter of a T-Rex.
Yeah, we got that T-Rex action. T-Rex is great. There's going to be haters. I have one buddy who's like, I don't like T-Rex. It has distorted sound. I'm like, bro, like Moti uses it. John Christian, I think, has used it. Respawn on Revealed Recordings, I've seen him use it. I like using it. This guy's using it. He's using a hard limiter, just a straight up hard limiter, keeping the ceiling at 0 dB, just to keep the levels in check and just to make sure it doesn't go louder than that.
I just keep the style on clean. The input is on 0 and the output is on 0 as well. I don't boost anything here on my limiter at the end. I just want something to keep my sound not higher than 0 dB.
So do you always start your tracks with the master channel?
Always.
Always. You don't do it after?
I always put it on, and at the end, when I finish the track, I might like boost a little bit with the EQ on my master, or just change the values that I just showed a little bit to taste. But I always put it on first, because for me, it makes the whole process of making a track better, because at one certain point, I just want to hear the loudness and I want to feel it, you know? And if I do it afterwards, I never get that point in my production where I'm like, okay, this sounds cool, you know? I need to do this in order to make the track. It works for me, but I can understand that for other people, it works the other way, you know?
This is true, and I resonate with this 100%. Too many producers these days, they want to make a track at like the lowest levels, and then they want to turn it into the loudest banger. And it's like, you can't do that. You got to work with tricks. Take a look at the videos I just made. It resonates completely with loopers. I talked about how putting a plugin on the master, but drive the input so it can accommodate for mixer tracks at a lower volume. So you're hearing something loud, but you compensate for headroom. You gotta make a track loud with loudness in mind. Otherwise, you're gonna struggle to take the track that is softer and more dynamic and then turn it into a sausage. So I definitely agree with him here. It's good to put your master on, and it doesn't have to be a crazy chain. You don't need to do the EQ and the glue and all that. You could just have a limiter and have a loud track, because when you hear it banging, when you hear it's loud, it's going to inspire you, and you can get an idea of what it's going to sound like with the finished product. But when you don't, and the track that you're making, you're not certain what it will sound like mastered, there's going to be a lot of change sonic quality. So I think this is very important, like he said, to see what it sounds like, to see how it's like when it's going to bang at those high levels. The loudness really gets you motivated, inspired. But just do what works for you. If you don't want to do that, you want to do at very low listening levels, I can understand that as well.
I've tried it once to use a mastering service, but I don't like it, to be honest. I just want to do everything myself. I think like mixing in general is also a taste thing. There is no good way to do a mix. There is no one rule you should follow to have a thing. It's all like taste, and that's the beauty of music. There are no rules. Just do it.
Just do it. That's it. Just fucking do it. And that's the thing, is that, like he said, I hate those master services. I really don't like those online services, because it is conveying this idea that dance music and mastering are not correlated, but they are. When you try to make a big room kick, it's loud. Dynamics are involved. Levels are involved. Frequencies are involved. It's a big room kick. It needs the thumb part. It has to have bass. You are doing sound engineering. And so they're embodied together. So really like that he is taking it in his own hands, because you're going to learn a lot, and you don't have to. If by all means, if you want to subscribe to a service or get a second opinion, that's good. But I agree with him here. It's good for us to take it in our own hands, and there's a lot that we can learn from it.
When you think it sounds good, like, believe in it, you know? And when someone else says, no, you cannot limit every channel, just do it and see how it works for you.
Exactly. Too many people. I saw a post on a group, and I just face-palmed, just cringing. This guy's like, oh, how many tracks do you guys finish? For me, it's one track I finish for every 100 I'm working on. I'm like, dude, are you serious? 100? 100? What are you doing with those tracks? Are you hoarding them for yourself? Are you building like some beer bottle cap collection? Release that. Release that music. Ollie James said, a guy on Revealed and Spinnin', he said, if a track is of a certain quality, get it out. Put it somewhere. Even if you're not confident enough, maybe put it on a certain website. Maybe put it on a different site. Put it on your like SoundCloud bootleg profile. Whatever. Don't keep it to yourself. Store it in your hard drive with all that hours and blood, sweat, and tears for no one to hear. Are you making music for you only, or are you making it for others? Because it's a unified experience, and too much of us these days, we're too self-critical. We don't want to just do it. You gotta just fucking do it. Just finish that fucking track.
I also made a track, I'm Heavy, that says something about me, and in the track, I'm Odd, I was looking for a vocal that says something about me. Because at the end, your music is a reflection of who you are and your character. So always try to find elements that can translate who you are into music. So I'm also a little bit odd. It's actually a loop, but I chopped it up a little bit because I wanted variations. I didn't want the loop to repeat itself and have some variations. I removed a little bit of the low frequencies, boosted in the mid and the highs.
That's one thing too, I need to start doing more of, is shuffling around loops. He has a really good point, just so that the loop is not like, oh, that's a loop. It's really a good idea to take loops, cut them up, and that really makes it so much more enjoyable, I think, keeps the listener more inspired. A second note regarding his EQ, I think a lot of producers early days are scared to boost, but it's okay to boost if you're boosting for the right reasons, and you're not just boosting for the sake of boosting. So really just listen to your ears. They are your biggest asset here.
And here I use the Waves L2 limiter to control my volume, because I don't want it to be louder than -6.5 in this case. As you can see, that's your outer ceiling, so your output.
Good point there. He keeps it at a ceiling. He doesn't want it to exceed. So I can't recall what it's like for the Waves limiter, but I would imagine what he's explaining is that he's limiting it and keeping a absolute maximum, because he doesn't want it like being louder than the kick. And again, this ties into what I explained about the kick being the boss, you know, if you want it to be the boss and nothing else being above it. So he's incorporating those strategies. If you take a look at the notes here, this is important too. I've been doing this more and more. Bass is great, right? Sub is great. And if we look at the notes he's playing here, he has these small little portamentos. He has these small little glides. And those glides are great because they sweep through frequencies. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Goes up and down. And Steven Vegas does this a lot. A lot of artists do this. And it creates movement, but it also creates like fat bass, because then you're getting a big sweep of bass frequencies instead of just one static note. So playing around with glide is vital, and I think it will help make your productions more interesting, the bass more impactful, and just good.
And here I did like a triplet thing that makes the bass a little bit unique, because the track is actually not in triplet, but these notes go in triplet, so it gives like a kind of weird flow to it, what I like.
Triplets are great. I use them a lot of times. I've been making a lot of tracks with triplets, and the triplets, he's right, they give you a sort of groove, because triplets, they're not ending, I think, perfectly quantized. If we think of a triplet 1/3, a third is like 0.33, right? 3 of them, they, you know, the way it's designed, the way it sounds is really cool. That's why you add a lot of big room, and also trap as well. Triplets are just cool. They stand out. They stand out amongst that standard grid quantized beat. So definitely 100% try and use triplets when you can. It's not always necessary, but it can sometimes give a little kind of cool funk.
Oh, no processing. Just the sidechain. I was missing some synth aspect in the mid frequencies, so I was searching for a sound that can fill up that. And that's how I came up with the top lead for the intro. Now we have the top lead, the bass, the breakbeat, and the vocal. So at this point, I already had the feeling, okay, this sounds cool, this is okay, but I need some fillers, some things to play at the background. And that's where we get like these sounds from. Nothing really special, but like small elements that add some detail to your track. And I think at the end, a good song has all these small elements that play in the background or just like in some phases of the track. And maybe as a listener, you don't notice it at once, but your underconscious knows that, oh, this sounds like deeper, that has more dimensions to it. So always try to add details, add things to the background that fill up your whole main concept, you know?
That is perfect. Very good, wise words. I keep stressing this to you guys too. The effects are more, they're just so important. And a lot of times we put a lot of importance on the loud stuff, but Kashmir talks about this too, is you got to build a mountain. If you have quiet elements, background elements, a louder element, they create this mountain and they give meaning to one another. And the unconscious, like when you listen to a track, right? How many times have you guys listened to a track as producers, songwriters, whatever, and then you're like, wait a second, I didn't notice that sound, right? A lot of times if you go back to a sound and you listen to it, you're like, whoa, I didn't notice that. I didn't see that. And effects give momentum to your track. Effects fill the background for a track. And just like an orchestra, it's not just like one cello player, one violin man. There's background vocal, there's this, you know, ambience. It creates the ambience, atmosphere, and creates a very good cake lasagna for your track. So definitely 100% agree with that.
Then, as you noticed, the build-up starts, and the build-up has this very cool guitar sound in it. I made this melody. And as you can hear, this guitar sound has a very organic, real feel to it, and it's really recorded. I just made the melody, and a very good friend of mine that's sitting here, actually, he's a very good guitar player, and he played it in for me. So in my tracks, I'm always looking for a way to combine digital aspects with organic aspects, and as far I cannot play any guitar, I get the help from my friends in that way. But that's nothing wrong with it in my way, and I think if you have an idea for a cool melody and you cannot play the guitar yourself, you can use plugins like Contd to recreate a very organic sound, but if you have someone who can play it in for you, why not? Just do it. Let's look at the processing of the...
This is very true too. Even my old tracks like Electro Champion, I use brass stabs a lot. I'm a big fan of strings. I like playing piano. I'm not a master of piano, but I love playing piano. And the more that we incorporate the digital electronic with a bit of some acoustic stuff, and it can be anything, could be acoustic percussion, it could be acoustic whatever, but it really adds a human element, a human touch to it, and makes it less like computery. And I think that is definitely something important, whatever you want to access it from, if you want to record it yourself. I mean, I play the clarinet, and I've been thinking about sampling my clarinet. I'm not a big fan of the sound of the clarinet. If I could go back, I would maybe learn a different instrument. But maybe I can incorporate it. Maybe I can make a big room track with like a clarinet sound. Who knows? And it makes it so much more interesting. So, agreed.
Guitar melody. So I will first play the guitar melody without the chain. And then I'm going to explain this chain. This is the guitar without the processing I did. Let's have a listen. So I started off with an equalizer. I just removed some low frequencies and I boosted a little bit the highs and the mids. Then I used some FabFilter Saturn. This is saturation, and how can I explain saturation? I think saturation, in my belief, it's a kind of mild form of distortion. It just adds some extra edge to it in the mid or high frequencies. It really depends on how you use the saturation. But the saturator gives this effect. So as you can see, the sound sounds louder in the mid and the high sections, and more loud in general as well.
So this is very important. If you've seen a video I've made about lead processing and how to drive your and pump your sound, I think it's called How to Pump Your Sound, and I talk about for extensively how something like FabFilter Saturn, which is an exciter, and he hit it hard there. He said mild, it's like a mild distortion, and the mild distortion will excite frequencies and make that sound really pop, and that's what it did with his guitar. And he's going to talk in a moment about also cleaning it up, because it does introduce some new frequencies which you might not want. You might get a bit of extra low end, you'll get a bit of extra high end, so that's really up to you. But it really helps make your sounds pump, because clearly his guitar was much darker and really became filthy and energized with that FabFilter Saturn.
And after that I used the reverb. I use all the reverb I use is the Arts Acoustic. I started off with this reverb. There's no specific reason, but I really like the sound of this reverb. But if you want to have a good reverb, I can also recommend Valhalla Room. It doesn't use that much CPU as well, and the sound is very nice. After the EQ, the saturation, and the reverb, I use the limiter. And here, I made sure the sound doesn't go higher than minus 10.3. So you want to keep your dynamics, but you also want the sound to be loud in a way.
That's true, and that's almost like a struggle for every musician, I think, especially in dance music, because it's like, at the end, you're left with like literally no dynamics, especially when you're competing with tracks that are just like super high. So in regards to this, do whatever you want. If you want to make a song with dynamics, do it. If you want to make a loud track, do it. The only suggestion I'd say is just like him with his master chain. You saw his master chain EQ, subtle compression, and the limiter was not pumping any extra gain. So what does that mean? That means is that really he makes it with loudness in mind. I make my track with loudness in mind. I don't want to compress 9 dB of gain like afterwards, because sometimes people will do that and then like their closed hat is like as loud as the kick. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but you know when you listen to a track and it sounds ultra squashed, like super squashed. Like, I'm not even talking about like the loud tracks. Even I made a track, Migos Narcos remix, and that was too loud. I should have backed it off. But even like worse than that, when people just compress, it's like minus 20 dB or something. So again, it's subjective. Do what works for you.
So what you guys might notice is that I use a lot of A-B structures in my drop. And I see it as like a question-answer thing. The first part is the question, and the B part is the answer to the question. And for drops, I start off with the A part, and then I just try out different B parts and see which loop actually, which two A-Bs work the best together. And this part takes a lot of time, to be honest, because in my opinion, it's pretty hard to make something that flows into each other, but also goes back in a good vibe to the first melody.
So if you guys don't really understand what he's talking about there, I mean, his track will explain, but of course, when you play music, a lot of times it's a question and an answer, a call and response. You've heard this a lot. You don't have to always do this. It's up to you. An example of that would be like, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Bum, 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 bum. Right? That was the reaction. And then it comes bum 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 bum. There you go. There's the voice interpretation of A and B, or call and response, question and answer. So really though, it's cool because it makes a track interesting, which is what he has done.
For me, this is like exciting because I don't use the same melody all over in the drop, and you always have this contrast from A to B, so you keep the attention of the listener in a way. I normally like put my kick on like minus 5 dB, but sometimes I push it up to minus 3 during the track, or like I lower it even to minus 6. It's also, these values are not fixed values, you can play around with it, but for me, to start off, I always start with minus 5 for my kick, and the rest always plays lower than the kick, because my kick is the loudest element in my track.
There you go. You just heard it from the man on Martin Garrix's record. What was the video that I just made? How the kick is so important, the loudness of the kick. He is choosing, instead of 0 dB, he's brought it to the minus 5 threshold, and everything else falls below it, and he wants the kick to be the loudest. So again, these are really important things because, again, like we say, no rules, but there are some guidelines. And with dance music, the kick is so important. Armin van Buuren said in his masterclass, if your kick isn't hitting hard, if it's not a good kick, you're going to learn it the hard way. When people don't dance, or they're like, whoa, there's no energy, because the kick has so much energy. Drums are very important. Travis Scott, again, he says like, he really doesn't care if the drums are not on point, like then the track is just, it's just going to be a terrible track. The drums are so important, and especially in dance music.
Here we have the kick drum, and then you have the click.
So the click, he just means the top kick.
There's actually a click from a track that I made like years ago, Seoul, like 4 years ago, but I really like the sound of the click. And that's why I always also recommend, when you make a track and you have like a specific cool sample in it that you really like, just save these things, because you never know how you're going to use it later. And some elements of some tracks I use already for years. That also adds to developing your own sound, you know?
That's true. My sample pack that I released is so much stuff that I've made from scratch, and I'm reusing them. People reuse them in their own way. Everybody uses samples in their own way. Stop hoarding your sounds only not to use them, or not even sharing them. Make a sample pack for yourself. Keep it a private sample pack. Launch a public sample pack. These are important things that every producer I've seen time and time again, they're saying keep those sounds, recycle those sounds. Why make your whole production process tough again, you know? You know? So that is very important. And, you know, when I'm working on new tracks, you don't always have to reuse the same sounds, but sometimes you're like, hey, does this work? Oh, great. And you already had a sample to just speed it up. I love doing sound design, but I also like calling samples that I've already made to see if it can quickly speed up my workflow. It'll speed up your workflow. It'll inspire you. It'll help you with many things. There's nothing to lose. Save those sounds.
So the body of the kick and the punch together sounds like this. So as you can see, the punch definitely plays lower volume than my body. I don't want my punch to be as loud as my body, because if your punch is too loud, it takes away the power of the kick underneath it. So I try to put my punch lower than my real kick, and that sounds very well.
That's true. In the track I just teased to you guys, the recent video, not the one about pluck, but before that, about kicks, the top kick that I made is like way lower. If the kick level is here, like the top kick is much lower. And sometimes amateur will think that like, well, my kick is so loud, but why can't I get the sub so loud? Why is this sub like when I go beyond, I don't know, let's, as an example, why when I go beyond -10, -9, it starts to suffocate the lead, or it starts to, because don't look, okay, it's called engineer. You have to use your ears. Don't just look visually. So you have to just go by how it sounds. And that's why I like backing down things, and I introduce my top kick. I'm like, okay, I like it there at -12 and the kick at 0 dB.
There's a clap I use a lot. It's from the Roland 808 pack. I just layered it with this clap that gives a little bit of tail to it. I have a kind of signature low bass that I really like using in my tracks. How I make my drops, I have these kicks and the claps ready, and then I'm searching for the right bass groove. So in this case, that is this bass. Might hear there's like a slight difference in the sound of the bass between the A and the B section. The B section has this small notch thing sound on it that just gives a little bit more body to the bass. A lot of you guys might be producers that make synths and basses from scratch, from init. I really don't like that. It's not my thing. I just like take presets that I like, and I just tweak them in a way and make them unrecognizable. And that's also an approach. I mean, there's, like I said, there's no one way to do things. The thing you should watch out, though, with using presets is that that it doesn't sound as how the preset actually sounds. So if you have a cool preset and sound, just try to tweak it that much that it's unrecognizable anymore, and it's a unique sound, you know?
That's true. A lot of times there's these arrogant producers that shame people for using presets, but some of the biggest guys in the industry will just call up presets, maybe tweak them a bit and go ahead, because they don't want to spend like hours doing sound design. It can be very redundant and tiring for people. I like sound design, and so for me personally, I love exploring new sounds, but I also don't mind like opening a patch. Like there's the track I'm working on right now called 007. It has a standard sample, but it's been layered with so many other sounds I've made, so the entirety of the sound is like mine. And he has a point there. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to go ahead and tweak a sound, and what he said is like, that's true. You don't want to be the producer who like everyone recognizes all your sounds. Like, oh, it's REFX Nexus, or you know, even when you use something from like a Cashmere pack, Respawn said like, try and keep stuff like not recognizable. You know, you don't want to be a producer where a big label listens to it and it's like, oh, standard Cashmere fill with this and this and this. You can do it, but it kind of loses its genuine authenticity, because everything becomes recognized from which pack, which synth. You know, you got to keep those in mind.
Bass. What did I do here? I didn't like cut a lot of my low frequencies here because I have not another bass playing here actually. So I wanted to keep the power of this bass. So I just like cut it a little bit, and I boosted, I think, my root key also a little bit.
With this, you guys don't have to high pass your bass. You can try it out, experiment with it, and you know, honestly, just try it out. Sometimes you don't need to. On his break sub, he didn't even put any processing, just like a little sidechain. So just do what sounds good to you at the end of the day.
So the next thing, that's my magic, to be honest. That's the wow filter. I use it a lot on basses only, because if I use it in this way, I use it on synths or higher elements, it just doesn't work. It's like very good for lower element. So this is how it opens up normally, and then you click on vowel mode, and it jumps into vowel mode. And vowel mode, basically, a vowel is like a, e, o, u, I. I think it boosts these vowels and these harmonies and it just adds like a tube distortion kind of effect. Normally it's on vowel mode, but I also put it here on band reject. This plugin actually was used back in the days for the first dubstep sounds, where people automated this button, and then you could like make these dubstep growls. But I use it in a different way. I just put it on vowel mode and band reject, and then I take the resonance a little bit back and give it a little bit of overdrive. And then I just start playing around with these vowels combinations, so you have a vowel A and you have a vowel B.
That is very true. I'm glad he brought up the history behind it, because I used that plugin back in the day, not too much because it was a bit sophisticated, some controls I didn't need, but I did use that plugin. I know Lucky Date used it. I think maybe Zed used it. Lazy Rich used it. It was a popular plugin for Electro House. Check it out. It's a really cool low pass filter plugin. You can create some cool vowels with it. You can do overdrive and distortion with it. You can use it like statically. You don't have to automate stuff like how he's doing. He wants to do it to just really emphasize the bass. Or you could go crazy with it. And I think there's a newer version where they give you a lot of controls with the LFOs, and you can do some really cool sequencing. So if you want some inspiration, why not? Check it out.
So yeah, so with the wow filter on, it sounds like this. So what the wow filter also does, what you don't want, it adds new frequencies to your sound. And I just cut it a little bit of the lows. So I think it added too much low, so I cut it a little bit more again, and then I started boosting here, ducking a little bit of the highs, and boosting in this range, but resulted in this. I didn't want all the high elements of this bass sound, and I really wanted to focus on the lower elements. And then what I use is a limiter. I actually use the Waves L2 on almost every separate channel in my mix. Some people find me crazy for it, but I like it. So it works for me.
See a lot of that. It works for me. It works for me. What works for him might not work for me or for any of you guys. And if someone tells you to do it a specific way and they're like, don't do it this way, that way sucks, unless they're giving you proper critical feedback to maybe try out something. But if they're shaming you and telling you don't do this, or how my friend would say T-Rack sucks, but this guy's using it and he's signed to Martin Garrix's label, you always got to discover it for yourself, you know? We are all a unique piece of DNA, and what we like, what is my cup of tea is not going to be your cup of tea, you know? I am not a big fan of country music. Does it mean that someone shouldn't enjoy country music? Of course not. They should enjoy it. But we all have different tastes. And so I really love that he's pushing that knowledge and philosophy.
For the top lead, actually, guys, it's one layer. It's from the Crane pack, actually. And the melody I was talking about earlier that my friend played, I just used that melody again in a drop, but with a total different sound, which gives the contrast that I was looking for. So first you have the acoustic guitar, and you don't expect something like this to come afterwards, and that's kind of the shock factor to the track, I think. This here, what you see right now, is it's called Notch EQ. And what you do...
when he goes into this is very important. Notch EQ, we're cleaning up and sweeping up frequencies, but he'll better explain.
Is you put these bands all the way up, actually, and then you start searching for the annoying frequency range. So this is a pretty high sound, so it's pretty common that it has like frequencies that bother your ear, and you just go through them, and you find that exact frequency, and then you just duck it down. So let's say... super annoying, so I ducked this down. And that's what I did, but watch out doing this, because when I started doing this, I just ducked too much frequencies, and then it loses all the power of the synth. So you don't want to remove all the annoying frequencies, just choose a few, and then see if the sound is good enough at that point, and don't duck everything, because you will kill the sound.
I had an experience with this, actually. I've made a video about this, sweeping frequencies with Pro Q, so check it out if you want to see a better explanation. He explained it very quickly. You're going through a frequency of a sound, especially when you process a sound a lot. There can be frequencies that are harsh, and in the whole scheme of things, when you listen to a track, you might not hear that. Sometimes you have to go looking for it. And it's kind of like an unconscious thing, unless it's just horrendously loud, like some tin can. And he has a point. When you back off too much, you got to be careful how much you're doing, just do a bit of it, not too much. And if you bring the gain all the way down, like he's doing like maybe like, I don't know, -6, -12, maybe at most. If you do too much, I had a track that long ago, I don't even know what the name of the track was. It was around 2013 maybe. And the track on the master channel, imagine doing like 40 of these notches. That's what I was doing on the master channel, because I thought like, oh, I gotta find every single unknowing frequency and then my track will sound good, and has nothing to do with that. This could also probably roll banger without those notches he did, but he did that because he's like, there's some frequencies I don't like, let me just back them off a bit. And we don't want to do too much because, like you said, it'll kill the sound. It'll remove the harmonics and make it like some flattened pancake shoe.
Equalizer again, boost a little bit more of these frequencies. This is BX Stereo Maker. It's a stereo plugin that I use from Brainworks. I just did a little bit of stereo expansion here. Then I use the reverb, limiting, and these are my sidechains afterwards. So that's for the A part of the drop. So for the B part, this is the synth. It's a Serum sound, and a very cool function in Serum that I use is the sync function on synths, and it sounds like this.
This function also exists for you guys in Massive. If you guys use a analog wavetable on the very left, the VA, virtual analog, I've done a video on analog synths. You can use the synth, you can use the sync button to make these like whoa, 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 and go up higher, and it goes just like this in Serum. So you don't have to use Serum, but use whatever you like.
So let's say I start a drop and I first use this sound, then in the second 16 bars, I can put this one up, and then the synth plays a harmony instead of the original sound, so you can keep building tension in the track. Once again, just equalizing, my wow filter, another equalizer, just some reverb, and some limiting. That's it for the drop. I want to finish it by here and give you guys some time to ask some questions.
You let your sub bass go through in the entire build-up, and I was wondering, why don't you cut it off just before the drop?
So the thing, you see it playing there, but on my master I have a filter that cuts the low frequencies during the build-up. So all the low frequencies get cutted, so eventually you don't have the full bass playing with all the full ranges there. Because that's the thing also, you need to put a filter on your master towards the drop.
That's true. Many times, many producers and many A&R from labels will tell guys like, yo, do a quick high pass right before the drop. And this just creates a little bit more impact. However, on the same note, you do want to make sure that the break has bass. Like if the buildup is, there's no sub, there's no low end, there's no energy. So you got to build that energy. The energy is slowly disappearing, and then there's something going on, and then slam. But if there's no energy, you don't, I know some producers might think, okay, maybe I can make a big slam, but then there's nothing before it. But you do want something before it. That break needs some body to it. That riser needs some body to it. Sub, bass, but just automating it, modulating it, and then right before the drop, maybe making sure there isn't some crazy sub going on. But there are songs I've made where I've gone up in pitch with the sub, and then it comes down, and then it just slams. So again, just do what sounds good. Don't try to subscribe to always doing something just because somebody does it. I don't idolize any artist. I just grab knowledge from each of them and incorporate my own strategies.
How much time did you use on the project?
23 hours. I think, to be honest, on the average, I spent 40 hours on a project, but this one was such a simplistic thing because, as you can see, there are not that many elements actually in this track. It's like a bass and a melody and a guitar thing, and that's it. So that's the power of less is more, I think.
That's true. A lot of times we get our projects so sophisticated that it's so hard to level things and keep things in check. Sometimes simplicity is great. Sometimes something more sophisticated is good. And in regards to what he was saying earlier, I just want to say that I think he was using FabFilter Simplon on his master. FabFilter Simplon, you can automate the mix amount and you can automate the high pass. So you could do a high pass. I've done that many times. You can put FabFilter Simplon. It's a zero latency low pass, high pass plugin, and you can put that on tracks too if you like. In regards to project time, there's no right or wrong answer, but sometimes when you stagnate too much on a track, the track gets dull. You get tired of listening it so much. Some of the greatest tracks I made quickly. I think Electro Champion was made in like 1 or 2 days. The other track that I made, Hardcore Motherfucker, that one, it took like so long because I kept changing stuff. It was first a remix, then it became another remix, and I'm like, I want it to be original. The track I'm making called 007, it has 9 hours into it. The song structure is complete, but I think I'm going to be doing a collab, so I'm not sure how much more will evolve, what will change. So again, this is all relative, but try to go in focused. It's very difficult to remain focused. We get too distracted, like, oh, let me look at all these snare drums. Oh wait, mastering. Oh wait, do this. Go in and really remain on a task and don't get too sidetracked.
Do your sidechain, your bass, and your synths with the same waveform?
Yeah, I for everything I use the same sidechain. I don't have per se a reason to it, but it just sounds tighter in my opinion.
So that last point, he was saying, do you use the same sidechain? So he's just saying, yeah, I use the same sidechain. And it's not to imply that you have to sidechain everything. And sometimes some stuff need a bit less sidechain, less harsh of a curve or a harsher curve. But in here, he's just talking about keeping the workflow simple. He's using a lot of kickstart. He just wants to keep the workflow simple and keeping a congruency. Because obviously, if we imagine if there was a different sidechain on every different track, it would just not sound glued together and relative to the kick. So a lot of good points here, a lot of good wisdom here, a lot of good points that he shared, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown of optimizing the video and giving my 2 cents. Really wanted to try something a bit different. I thought it would be interesting. So overall, I think the video was really good. I think the original video was about 30 minutes. So if you guys want to check out the original video, I'll link it in the video description. And if you guys enjoyed this, please make sure to smash that like button. Make sure you guys are subscribed. And let me know what suggestions you have. If you have any questions about what Loopers was talking about, feel free to drop a comment. If you guys have any requests or want me to review a different masterclass or anything, I'm always down. I never did a video like this, but I'm always down to try new things. And the important takeaway from watching videos like this is don't just soak up everything and decide, you know what, I love Looper's music and I want to do everything that he does, because he keeps insisting too. There's no rules, just do it. Save your sounds. Do what works for you. Subjectivity, it's relative, you know, it's like, you know, it's not what he enjoys, you might not enjoy, and vice versa, right? So always take everything with a grain of salt, keep an open mind, stay very center, and just go in and do it, because if you don't ask, the answer is always no. A door might be there, but you got to reach for it. You got to go and do it. Dan Pena, this really successful entrepreneur, says that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, which is implying that like we want to make that banger, but taking the steps to actually do it is very difficult, right? Or we want to go run that marathon, but again, engaging in the training is very difficult. We want to get huge, but the physical training is difficult. And regardless of how saturated music market will get, there will always be opportunities all over the place. So believe in yourself. No one will be more passionate in yourself than you. And just go in and smash it. And that's what I'm here for, is to share my insight, my knowledge with you guys. I want to help you guys become better producers and help myself too. We're all in this together. We're all brothers and sisters in arms in this together. And I think the more that we collaborate positively and the more that we do inner competition instead of egotistical competition, I think in the end will be really good. So bravo to Loopers. Thank you, Loopers, for this video, and Stamped Records for putting this together. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching and your time. Take care.